I'm here today with my father, who's a longtime otologist in Huntington, West Virginia at our Museum for Otology and Neurotology, and we're going to review some historical items that we have tended to forget about over the years, and we need to really think about where we came from in our specialty. And so we're going to go over different ear specula that are that preceded what we use now. So in my hand I'm holding something very similar in dimension to what we're used to using in the clinics today, but we come from a history of some very unusual devices that predate this. So we're going to go over that, and we're going to discuss that with my father today.
Well, I mean, if you look at this, Joe, the main component of an otoscope is the ear speculum, lighting, and magnification. And to get to this point, it took about 300 years. So as you can see, they started with the ear speculums, which is the first thing that they had to solve. In the 18th century and 19th century, they were competing with each other, all the otologists and the otolaryngologists. Who's going to name an ear speculum after his name? And so we have here a group of ear speculae that invented by different fathers of our specialty, so to speak. So, for instance, this here is the Hartmann ear speculum. They used to come in sets, different sizes. So as you can see, it narrows towards the base, and then you have the base opened here. And the difference between Hartmann and the Politzers, they are basically the same, but Politzer doesn't have a rim. So Politzer wanted to put his name on this, so he got the Hartmann, removed the rim, and it's Politzer's ear speculum.
Do you think the Pulitzer had no rim because it was not attached to a handheld speculum or a device, and just held by hand? Or
Absolutely, and Pulitzer was very worried about the reflection of the light. In fact, he painted some of his ear speculums inside with black, non-reflective type of material. And as you can see here, there's no shiny surface to reflect the light. And
so the Earhart's specula, you know, you look at them at first glance, they mostly look the same, but there are subtle differences, as most of us in our field know, that sometimes subtle size changes, half-millimeter changes can make a difference in the shape. And so these specula have a little bit more of a oval tip, and so this became a little easier to insert in the ear canal and really mirrored the canal shape much better than just the round ones. And
well, as you can see, when talking about the ear canal and the narrow, look at this here with the slant of the tip of it. And I think this here is just to push against the anterior hump.
Yeah, and it looks very similar to what we use in the operating room today. Similar to some of the other specula, we've got the wild specula, and this grouping is actually made of silver. So, you know, it's hard to believe that at one point that these specula that we use routinely that are plastic or inexpensive metals now were made of silver at one point.
Well, I mean, talking about silver, here's a more expensive one. This is Deleu. Deleu it's a long one, and you wouldn't believe it. This is made of gold and platinum. And that was the time that there were only few people using ear speculum. So I think they could afford it, and that will impress the patient probably, having this. Yeah. And they put it in a beautiful case here that just snaps in. The other thing they used is the glass ear speculum. I think that's about 1920, 1930. All of these here, they are mid-19th century towards the latter part of the 19th century. Mm-hmm.
And they also came up with a real interesting speculum in order to expand the canal some. So instead of just wedging a larger speculum, this one was adjustable to some degree, and you can pinch it or leave it relaxed as much as you need to expand the canal. As we know, the membranous canal is fairly pliable, and so it probably served a nice purpose to get in the canal, to clean the ear. And they even had some smaller ones with similar idea, almost like a bird's beak or a duck bill. But these aren't. We don't see too many items like this today in our practices.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, the bivalve ear speculum is something that we don't use it now. We use it as nasal speculum, but that was something. Actually, the ear speculum started with bivalve. For instance, this is about late 17th century, early 18th century. It's called the Hildeness ear speculum. Look how big it is. Just introduce it to the ear canal, spread it. And I believe I read somewhere that this is done mainly to remove foreign body from the ear, not to really visualize the eardrum, or because they were not at the stage that they wanted to see the eardrum or go beyond. So this is an old Hildeness.
So along the same lines as discussing the bivalve, we have the Perret pediatric or children's bivalve scope, which very similar to what we use now as a nasal speculum, but just much more slender and a little bit easier to get into an ear canal of a cooperative child. Then the Robbie speculum. Now, instead of having ends that we would squeeze together, you dial it up with this screw and expand it as wide as you need to using that screw on the side. And another variation of a bivalve right here as well. And these were mid-18th century devices.
Well, but the person that revived these old original bivalve is Kramer in Germany. Kramer who used to be a very famous otologist. He was the leader for about 50 years, and he had the Kramer's ear speculum. And as you can see, it has the Hartmann. Some of the Kramers have the Hartmann type of ear speculum, and the other one has the Earhart ear speculum, where it comes straight and then it opens. So these are the bivalve, very important stage of developing an otoscope. There's something of interest, Joe. I've never seen anything like this before. Just one time I found this on an auction, that they have a diaphragm here, apparently, so the examiner does not get exposed to pus coming out, or I don't know why they had this kind of
it may even be to block light out.
Or black
peripheral light.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're right, Joe, especially with the black paint around here.
Yeah.
And somebody came up with something like this. So instead of squeezing it like in this direction, you squeeze it front back.
Yeah.
And it's a bivalve. But the interesting thing I've never seen, except for years looking for these things, this is called the ear scope. What it has the gauge. So before the examiners chooses the ear speculum, they get the gauge large, small, and medium.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. So now we have really to focus our attention on how we get light into these ears. And before we really had electrical source for light, we used mirrors. And even to this day, some of us still prefer head mirrors when we're examining oral cavity or pharynx in the nose. But back in the old days, you'd even look, you'd gather your light through a mirror to look in the ears. And so this simple device, you'd have basically a handheld, essentially head mirror, and look through the opening and focus the beam of light through the speculum. And so, you know, it probably took a little skill to try to manipulate that. And I remember as a resident, that was one of the early things you have to learn to be able to figure out how to look through the head mirror and focus your light into the nasal cavity, or oral cavity, and oropharynx. And this is similar, but it was you really you had one hand occupied with the mirror, the other hand occupied with the speculum, and so. You know, this is a little bit more consistent with what we're used to, where we have the head mirror and the speculum. And even to this day, every now and then, if I have a head mirror on and I've got a light, sometimes I'll even, if I just need to clean out a little cerumen, sometimes might use that technique. But usually the headlight, headlamp instead of the mirror. And then similarly, this device here keeps you with one hand free if you need to clean. You have the bivalve speculum with the mirror, and you can look through and focus your beam that way. So it's pretty interesting evolution of the speculum and trying to get light into the ear and be able to see a little better.
And just a side comment, we saw the Kramer's bivalve. This is also bivalve, but this is called MIOT, M-I-O-T, MIOT ears, bivalve speculum, and the difference is it has that gooseneck here. I don't know what benefit it does, and these things came in a very nice box where you put them together, put the ear speculum here, and use the mirror one hand, as you said. The other thing that they really they accomplished this. They said, well, we want to see things better, so they started getting the magnification lenses. So this is one of the earlier ones that I'd like to show you here. The ear speculum and this here, you know, you can remove it and put higher magnification or lower magnification. And the set here has all different size speculum. They come in big set like this or a small set with only one ear speculum. I found this fascinating because it's a bivalve, and it's the screw, you know, that opens and closes the speculum, and then you swing the lens to see magnified eardrum. I think this is, to me, an amazing thing, amazing ear speculum, because it has a magnifying glass, but they cut the top here. This is the low ear speculum, which the long one that we showed before. But you can here see magnified eardrum and introduce the instrument through this opening here. So this is one of the earliest we can see. We're going to see later an example of electric otoscopes that try to do the same thing.
Yeah. So over time, they needed to figure out other ways to enclose everything in one device. So there was a lot of moving parts, and try to gather light. You still didn't really have an answer for man-made light. You had to use natural light. And so they started using mirrors and magnifying lenses. And so the Bruntons, which probably is one of the more common from this era, did that by gathering light through this side port and hitting a mirror at 45 degrees and reflecting the light forward into the speculum while the examiner would look through the eyepiece. Similarly, this is another Brunton's scope. And then this one, Clark's, is a similar speculum with mirror made in America at the time.
Yeah, I think that's the first American manufactured.
Yeah.
So, and I think this one here, this one, he applied magnifying lens, and the magnifying lens, instead of being at the eye end here, there is a tube, and the lens is right at the tip of the tube. That's the only otoscope I have seen that has this kind of setup. Started with this. I mean, this is the Bonafont French gentleman who invented this, and this you can see it much easier and clearer. He used a mirror with a 45 degrees where the light will come and reflects, the beam will reflect through the speculum, and there is the hole in the middle of it where the examiner will see through that hole. So you see the magnifying lens here, the examiner sees through that hole, and the eardrum is here. The big problem they had is lighting. So they were under the mercy of sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people that said, well, let's do something about it. And we are fortunate here that we have a couple of these devices where, as you can see, this is a typical Clark ear speculum. However, as you can see, this is a 45-degree mirror here, but what they have here, they have a candle. So you can light the candle, and the light will go through this tunnel here, hits the 45-degree angle, and reflects the light to the front, towards the eardrum. So this is the first one that is, everything is enclosed. The light source, magnification, and everything. That's one of the earliest kind of ear examining device. They used to call it the self-lit otoscope. And somebody here is using an alcohol sponge, and you can see the alcohol sponge in the bottom of this opening, and this is where the alcohol container is. The wick is right here, and again the same principle. The light comes from the alcohol lamp. It goes through this tunnel here. It hits the 45-degree mirror here, and reflects towards the eardrum. And this is the eyepiece with the magnifying glass. I believe that these two made a lot of difference in the pre-electric otoscopes or otoscopes. So the biggest thing, the biggest breakthrough regarding lighting is when the electricity came to play. And we'll go back to the Bruntons. That's the Bruntons, that's the light will go from the sun or whatever and reflects to the ear speculum. And this is the very first electric otoscope. It's, as you can see, it's a Brunton. It's exact Brunton, except that there is a bulb here, and that's where you hook it to the electricity through these two holes here. So it has the same principle, the 45-degree angle mirror with the hole in the middle where the examiner looks through and the light will go through. So now they don't need sun, they don't need kerosene lamp or any source of light except for the electricity. Then when they developed batteries, they used the same kind with a battery or electricity. So it has this ability to use any kind of light source, electric light source. So I believe that this is a breakthrough. Another thing that I found a few years ago is the battery operated. One of the earliest batteries that are contained in this housing here. Again, if you look at it, it's a typical Bruntons with the channel and just the same principle. So these are the earliest electric otoscopes. And as you can see, it's all enclosed in one device, held with one hand.
Yeah. So over here we have similar idea in the sense that we still have a reflecting mirror, but a bulb is in the bottom of this lighter scope. This is from the 1880s.
Yeah.
And you can move your magnifying lens around, and it was electric powered, so at the bottom you connect the electrical input. Similarly, there's light bulbs in these as well, and there's a reflecting mirror inside.
I think it will show if we remove that.
See the reflecting mirror here.
And you know, while you are holding it, we can hold it here so we can show this has a reflecting mirror, but it's half a mirror. So when you look through, you don't have to look through the hole in the center of the mirror. So this is one more step in the development of otoscope. So you have a bigger space you can look through. And this is more of an operative otoscope because you have the magnifying lens here, but you can introduce instrument. And I think that's why they make it half a mirror, so you have more space for instrumentation. Other thing here, these are just quickly some of the old versions of otoscope. This is one of the oldest otoscopes, after the lighter version. The thing about this here, and we'll be talking about later on, is the axis of the light beam. This is not the same axis of the center of the speculum, but that's the best you could do. The light bulb here, the light bulb is here with it was just a regular light bulb, nothing fancy about it, and then you introduce this here. Another interesting scopes, if I can get this here. This is one of these, I think this is called the Kai-Fu scope, where there's the battery here, the light is here, and the ear speculum. And this is how it comes. It comes in a box, and then you put it together. So it's one of these that you can slip it in your pocket because of the small size. People were excited about this kind of changes. One more interesting ear otoscope is this here, where the light bulb is here. But again, they did not solve the issue of having the axis of vision and the axis of light. And as you can see, I mean, if you try to look here, half of the axis is
in the way.
obstructed in the way here. But that's how they develop one step after the other. So the next thing that inventors worked on is magnification. They want to see more clearer eardrum. So they started in the beginning without any lens here. And then this is one of the earliest with a single lens. This is the Burgess otoscope. As you can see, the lens here. But just a side comment, look at the light source, how it is in a different axis of the visual axis. But that's, at that stage, was the state of the art. Then they got this kind that has a lens that you swing it and you have double lens, so the magnification will be better. Now this is the most fascinating, Joe. This here, they have a lens here that if you can take it out of the way, and that's the, let me just, so take it out of the way and you can see the light here and lens on top of the light. But if you want to concentrate the light more, they develop this lens that you swing it over the light source that can concentrate the light more. I haven't seen anything like this before. It's so fascinating. Because this is not for amplification. This is mainly for the light because it's in the way of the eye, the vision.
Yeah, it's probably back then you were still using a bulb.
Yeah.
And now we don't worry about it as much because we've got more of a fiber optic light where the light's a little more linear.
Exactly. So this is how you lock it in place here.
So these scopes, similarly, this is a otoscope, ophthalmoscope combination where we have battery operated with the complex lens here.
Yes.
With the magnifying lens in here.
And I think you can see it better with
see it
this
a little
here.
better here. It's more of an open, where the speculum is tightened into this area, and you've got the lens here for magnification. and it's the bulb right here, and so we can use instrument the ear if we need to.
Yeah,
through
and I
this
think this
scope.
is to focus, right? I think this here,
Yes.
you can turn
Yeah,
it
I
to
think
focus the light. But the most fascinating thing, Joe, that we found was the telescope, the real magnification, I call it, like using this here. It has a lens system in this area here where you can magnify the eardrum more. But the one that I really like, this is 1785. And it has that they used to call it at that time the microscope, the microscopic examination of the eardrum. I found it fascinating that at that time they attempted to do that. In fact, they went even further. I mean, this here, I mean, this is a real system for magnification, and this is what you plug to the electricity. And use this to examine the ear. So these three here, to me, are the predecessor of what we use today, the operating microscope. So they tried at that time. In fact, around the turn of the 20th century, they attempted in Vienna, in Austria, to do stapedectomy. And this is what they used. I mean, they didn't have microscope or anything. But I bet you, rather than this, I bet you this is what they used at that time. This, to me, is one of the most important steps in magnification of the eardrum. I have the patent for this. It's about 1880. And this here, you can release this to get the ear speculum out. And if you look at this here, you can move the light source up and down to center it towards the tip of the ear speculum. And the most fascinating thing about this, I imagine that this what they used in the early part of the 20th century to do stapedectomy in Vienna, in Austria, because they didn't have the operating microscope, and that's how they used the magnification to do procedures in the ear canal and the middle ear. The next step, the otologist wanted to be able to magnify the eardrum, but they want to be able also to operate, to remove a foreign body, to do meningotomy, whatever they needed to do at that time. So the earliest version of these are the otoscopes with the lens and a little opening here where you can introduce your instrument. Again, you can see here where the light source is here, is not, the angle is I always keep referring to it, is not the right angle as far as illumination of the eardrum. But anyway, then some of them had a larger opening. So that's, they can see, they can magnify the eardrum and introduce the instrument. And these here, you can take this out and use this, as you can see, the comparison to use only magnification. And some of the otoscopes were more generous with the opening. As you can see here, half of the eardrum is, half of the lens is gone, and there's the other half for magnification. Doesn't that remind you of the early ear speculum that was shaved? You know, half of it was removed. They had this half lens. And again, you can take this out and put your magnifying glass if you don't need to do any operative maneuver inside the ear canal.
These scopes are very unique, and probably even today would be some benefit. So this is a scope essentially with an operating or a procedure head, but instead of just having a single small lens, it has dual lenses, and they're just different focal lengths.
Yeah, I know. You want to show it to?
Yeah, so you can see a little deeper with one than the other, and focus a little deeper in the canal on the tympanic membrane.
Yeah.
And the other one's a little more superficial, and this is one that's with a closed head. The same idea, one lens. It almost looks like it's a binocular lens, but obviously it couldn't be with them spaced so closely. But When you look closely, there's just a different shaped lens.
Yeah, Joe, in fact, I have a sample. I don't know where I put it. One of them doesn't have a lens, it's just an opening, I think, for introducing instruments, and the other side has the lens. And I think a fascinating one that I want to share is this here, where it has two half lenses. So you can open them, and again, each lens has different power, so it serves several things. You can use different power magnification, and also you can introduce instrument, or you can close it completely and use it as a pneumatic for pneumatic otoscopy. This is extremely rare. I haven't seen other than this sample in my collecting years.